This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
On the Track is a monthly web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
So what have we got exciting that's coming up in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, Richard's in Tajikistan for the third time, and we're going to find out all about why, what, where and when.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another... What? Something weird's happening over there. We seem to have been transported to a leafy part of the home counties.
Helga, my dear, what have you been up to at St. Wettypants School?
Mayor, we've been having such an exciting time. We are making a film. We are doing a remake of the 1960s classic, The Bonks Go Beat.
That was all very charming. Thank you very much, Hilda. But what I want to do properly is to tell you about the show. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. And for those of you who don't know, every Wednesday evening at 6:30 for about 15 minutes, and every Saturday afternoon at 3 for about twice that, we bring you a mélange, a mixture, a mishmash. What else begins with M, Lauren?
Millet, of course.
Yes, I think that works for me. A millet of hard science, weird shit and surreality. What surreality? Well, why don't you ask her?
I am not even slightly amused by surreality.
Okay, Richard, now, I believe you're going off in a few days on another expedition. Where, when, how and why?
Dr. Chris Clark, John Hare and myself will be returning for the third CFZ expedition to the mountains of Tajikistan. We will be returning to the Romit Valley, which was the focus of the first expedition, and we will be looking mainly for the Caspian tiger, a species of tiger believed to be extinct from the 1960s, but in my previous two expeditions there we've met lots of people who have seen them in the modern day, including a park ranger who'd seen one a scant month before we were there, almost to the day. And we'll also be looking for a type of wild man called the gull, G-U-L, which is reported locally as well.
And is ghoul the same word or the same root word as the English ghoul?
Yes, it's the English word ghoul is a corruption of the Arabic gul, meaning to tear. It was originally applied to humanoid demons that lived in the desert and would emerge at night from under the sand to feed on corpses. So the original ghoul may have been based on depredations of things like hyenas.
And did the concept then spread into Central Asia as it became Islamified?
Yes, the word has become quite widespread. Like the word in other parts, the word dev is used for wild men as well. In fact, in Central Asia there are more names for wild men, I think, than anywhere else.
Dev, presumably, is the root of our devil.
Yes.
I'm always fascinated by the cultural cross-pollination of words. But last time you went to Tajikistan and we made the movie about it, you went to, was it called the Tagarak Valley?
Yes, we went to another valley, the Karatang.
Karatan.
The Karatang, but that was much further west and much more disturbed. So we got tiger reports from there, but the reports of the gull were all much, much older, from decades ago.
But if you're going back to the Romit Valley, which was where you went first time, from memory you had some much more recent ghoul sightings.
Yes, yeah, within the last few years of us being there, there were ones within the last, I think, 2 years.
Because one thing I've also remembered from what you've been talking about the ghoul is that it appears to be considerably more primitive than other Asian man-beasts like the Almasty that you've also hunted in what used to be...
It sounds different to the Almasty. It sounds smaller, and the hand structure is more like that of a chimpanzee, with the thumb further back on the hand than what the Almasty is.
So do you think this casts light, or any light, on the concept of the exodus of early humans from Africa?
Well, quite possibly, because we know that Homo floresiensis was a sister group to Homo habilis, which until now has never been found outside of Africa. No one ever considered that it or something related to it left Africa. So I think there were probably multiple migrations of these things, and many of them are still in relic populations.
If you were to place a bet on this, what do you think that the ghoul actually is?
That's a good question, because the hand structure is more primitive than Australopithecines, so it could be a lineage that is even further back, like Ardipithecus or something like that. I'm not saying that it's a surviving Ardipithecus, but it could be something that descended from it or a relative of it.
Now, in Africa, there are, if you go back to reading Heuvelmans, there are accounts of small, hairy men who are quite distinct from the other hominins that have been reported from Africa. And it has been suggested that these are surviving Australopithecines.
Things like the Agogwe. Yes.
I keep on thinking about the two little ginger-haired men covered in fur seen alongside a troop of baboons on a riverbank somewhere. I remember that story. I think that was a Agogwe.
Yes. Once again, they wouldn't be Australopithecus frozen in time. There'd be some descendant of one of the Australopithecines.
Because something that people often forget, even the most sensible people who are quite prepared to believe in evolution otherwise get a bit antsy about human evolution and forget that because there are so many branches that come off the same tree, that there is no reason why there shouldn't be evolved descendants of various hominins around the world.
No, there's no reason at all, and the fossil record is now pointing to this. The genetic markers on certain populations of modern human beings are pointing to this, and sightings of cryptid primates are pointing to this.
And the fossil record has, in recent years, unearthed quite a few little known fossil hominins that we didn't know anything about. I'm thinking about the Denisovans.
Yes, known only from toe and finger fragments and one jawbone, and one of the little fragments about the size of a grain of rice was so well preserved they got the entire genome from it. And then we've got, as well as Homo floresiensis, we've got Homo luzonensis now, which is a very similar thing from the Philippines. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that if there's a whole family of these smaller hominins on different Asian islands.
And also, now from memory, this was from somewhere in China, there are two yet to be classified ones that are just known as Homo species A and Homo species B at the moment. So there's a hell of a lot more to discover about our ancestry and our closest relatives.
Absolutely.
Difficult question here. How many species of Homo do you think there are still surviving?
Now, we're not counting mystery apes in this, so we're not counting things like orang pendek, which is probably an orangutan. We're talking about the genus Homo.
The genus Homo, or incredibly close enough relatives to be men rather than animals.
Let's see.
Sorry, it's a bit of a sort of a question, that. But
oh, that's very hard to answer. 4 or 5, I would have thought.
And what about the places which are still hardly explored? And I'm thinking about the forest in Siberia.
Anything could be hiding there in the forests of Siberia or in the jungles of New Guinea.
What about the reports of Bigfoot that sound more human than man, human than ape?
Well, I'm for both the Yeti and Sasquatch. I'm more leaning towards now a descendant of one of the robust Australopithecines rather than Gigantopithecus, because Gigantopithecus, and I was in the Gigantopithecus camp for a long time, it had the size, it was in the right place, but the wear patterns on the teeth seemed to show that it fed mainly on fibrous plant material like bamboo, whereas the Yeti and the Sasquatch seemed to be more omnivorous. So if I was a betting man now, I'll be backing a Paranthropus descendant for these creatures.
No, this actually dates the time of recording, because we are recording this at 1:30 on the 30th of August, which means tomorrow we are going to be broadcasting the first of 2 interviews with Ray Harwood, who we have dubbed the Sasquatch archaeologist, and he has come up with more and more evidence of quite sophisticated tool using.
We shouldn't be surprised at this. Apes use tools, all the known species of apes use tools, and our own ancestors were probably using tools back to the year dot. So it seems that stuff like Sasquatch and Yeti went down the evolutionary path of size and strength. So for processing something like a deer carcass, they would be ripping it apart with their brute strength and their teeth, rather than making a neat little hand axe to slice like something like Homo erectus might have done. So initially they would probably kill the deer by hurling a rock at it or smashing it with a club, but then I think they'd probably be ripping it apart rather than making fine little hand tools.
And of course they've had God knows how many million years to evolve and refine. Now, what are you going to be doing in the field? What is your modus operandi for this expedition?
Well, we're taking camera traps. We're going later in the year because the tigers are supposed to be coming down from the mountains around about September. That's when they start coming down. So we'll be taking up camera traps. If we can get hold of it, we'll get hold of meat for bait and try and get the thing on film. And also we'll be interviewing witnesses like we always do, and going up into the mountains looking for tracks and stuff like that, and hare.
Is there anything you're going to be doing differently to previous expeditions, apart from going at a later time of year?
Higher elevation, I think.
Because that's also a thing, it's also part of the way that science works. You test hypotheses and then refine the hypothesis as you go, which is why you're now going in September rather than in July, because you're more likely to see tigers coming down from the mountains.
Exactly.
I think there's very, very little doubt that the Caspian tiger still exists. But what I'm wondering, how far do you think its range is? Do you think it goes into the other neighbouring countries like Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, there have been sightings of tigers as far west as Turkey.
Recently?
The last 10-20 years, something like that.
Well, that takes them almost into Europe. In fact, there were this subspecies of tiger was found in parts of Europe, wasn't it, in the Caucasus?
At one time, yeah.
Because nobody ever seems to realise the idea of tigers and leopards being actually in Europe during historic times, which I always find massively exciting. Another thing that's interesting is that there have now been a few reports from Turkmenistan, which isn't a million miles away from where you're going, of cheetahs. And it looks as if the Asian cheetah is not just confined to that one population in Iran. I don't know what you think, but I've always thought that is likely, especially ever since I read Gettysburg.
Well, it's one of those countries we hear very little from. There seems to be very little communication between English-speaking countries and this part of the world.
Which is one of the reasons the CFZ are doing our best to make contact and make friends there.
And it's an ongoing project, just like Tasmania and Sumatra.
Now, and this is now treading in some very dangerous waters, and before we go any further, I would like to stress that my father was an Islamic scholar. I've been brought up alongside Muslims all my life, and I have a great respect for not for Islam, not for Islamism, but I have a great respect and tolerance for Islam. But I know you have had problems with hardcore Islamists from Saudi Arabia who have now started to colonize Indonesia. Do you have problems with the Islamic people in Tajikistan?
The people in Tajikistan were the most hospitable and friendly I've met anywhere in the world, and that's up against some stiff competition. The stuff in Sumatra was the influence of Saudi Arabia, and they were doing things like in Padang and in other cities, every weekend there are armed militia going and bursting into every room in every hotel to try and find unmarried couples and arrest them, which is one step from Nazism as far as I'm concerned. But that's not Islam. That is the baleful and controlling influence of Saudi Arabia, which most Muslims don't like. They don't like the House of Saud and its influence.
I think an awful lot of nonsense is talked about Islam here in the West, and even as a child, when my father was trying to explain to me the difference between Sunni and Shia Islam, it's a very big and complicated subject, and it's not a subject that can be taken down into TikTok-sized bites. And I think an awful lot of harm and misinformation is being done.
Well, the main difference is with the Sunni and Shia Islam is that one lot followed the guy in the marriage and one lot followed the woman in the marriage. Sunni and Shia.
And I've got you, babe. I have you very dear. So, good luck, mate. That we will send you off on that awful. We'll send you off on the wings of that terrible pun. And I hope you'll come in and tell us all about it when you come back.
Will do.
Because if you don't, I'm going to hunt you down and shoot you like a dog.
Unless I'm eaten by a tiger.
That's still one of your ambitions, isn't it? To be the first person to be killed and eaten by a cryptid.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, says,
Don't forget to ring the notification bell, otherwise you'll miss the new episodes.
and that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
These might look like ordinary, everyday people, but they're not. Let's take a closer look. I'm filling my tomato harness with talcum powder on the moon. Back seats for keep a welcome in the hillside. Cherry ripe, cherry ripe. I live inside of a crab with Rip Van Winkle and the Patty Cake Man. Yes, they were all wazzocks.
You can tell wassocks by their general was-tardedness. So remember, think once, think twice, think wassock.
That was a public information film.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is nearly the end of the show. First of all, we have resurrected a song from half a century ago to send the boys off on their journey with. Richard and the gang are off to Tajikistan again. They're looking for the goal, which was the Tajik APEMEN again. But they're not ordinary hikers, 'cause they're looking out for tigers that they think are the survivors of the Caspian race, and that'd be really ace. And second of all, another song, because the drama involving poor Daniel Barnett still goes on. You can probably find out what's been happening by looking online, but here's another song to give you a hint. And apologies to Elton John because I pinched it from him, and the first song, apologies to Slade for having stolen it from them. Daniel was flying last night on a plane, but he received so many threats from somebody I cannot name for legal reasons. That bitch is someone I can't name. Daniel was flying last night on a plane. The threats kept mounting up again and again and again when he was on that plane. That bitch seems borderline insane. Daniel was flying last night on a plane. He had a panic attack and they flew back to London again. But that boy has courage. We'll be hearing from him again. Daniel was flying last night on a plane. When a jealous bitch acting out of spite was just causing him pain. But he'll complete his movie. He'll tell his story once again. I'll be back next week. What are we going to do next week? Well, I believe we're going to be talking about pine martens in Devonshire. But you'll probably just have to wait and see. I want to say a big thank you to my special guest, who is Richard Freeman, and I want to say thank you to V. McQuinn for all he does behind the scenes, and to my producer Louis, who is still gallivanting around the new world, trying to bring order to it. And I want to say a big thank you to Graham, Deputy Director of the CFZ, and Mike Hare, who is the guy who takes me to hospital, gets me out of bed and wheels me around in my wheelchair. And I want to say a big thank you to the lovely Guinevere, who does so much behind the scenes you really wouldn't believe it. There is a new issue of the magazine out, or there will be by the time you see this, and I hope you enjoy it. You can get it on Amazon, and you can get all the previous issues on the CFZ website. So, I'll be back on Saturday. What am I going to be talking about? I've already told you I've got no real idea, but I think it's pine martens. And are you going to be there, Mr. McCrimmon? Because if you are going to be there, Mr. McCrimmon, I'll be seeing you.